It was supposed to be just another rainy afternoon, just another stretch of highway, just another drive home. But one glance toward the shoulder of the road changed everything. A young woman stood completely soaked beneath the endless gray sky, clutching a tiny baby beneath her thin coat while passing cars sprayed water only inches away from them. She never waved for help. She never begged anyone to stop. She simply stood there with the exhausted look of someone who had already lost everything worth asking for. In that single moment, I realized that sometimes the most desperate people don't cry the loudest, they become so broken that silence becomes their final language. If you believe kindness still has the power to change lives, if you believe in forgiveness, hope, and second chances, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs encouragement today, and subscribe to our channel so our community can continue sharing stories that remind us humanity still exists. Rain had been falling since late morning, turning the quiet countryside into a blur of silver mist and flooded fields. I had spent the day repairing storm damage for a local construction company and was looking forward to nothing more than a hot meal and dry clothes. The windshield wipers struggled against the relentless rain as I rounded another bend, but something standing beside an abandoned bus stop caught my eye. Most people would have driven past without another thought. After all, roadside scams existed, and common sense often warned against stopping. Yet there was something about the woman that didn't fit any story I had ever heard. She wasn't trying to flag anyone down. She wasn't pacing or acting frantic. She simply stood perfectly still, protecting the baby inside her coat with both arms while allowing the rain to soak every inch of herself. I drove another 100 yards before guilt became heavier than caution. My hands tightened around the steering wheel until I finally pulled over and reversed slowly toward her. When I lowered the passenger window, she looked at me with eyes that carried more exhaustion than fear. Her face was pale, her hair clung to her cheeks, and the infant remained remarkably quiet, nestled against her chest. She looked as though she hadn't slept in days. Before I could ask where she was going or whether she needed help, she whispered only one sentence that I have never forgotten. She simply said that she just needed somewhere to go. There were no dramatic explanations. No desperate pleading. Just those 7 heartbreaking words. I unlocked the passenger door. The inside of my truck quickly filled with the smell of rain and damp clothing. She apologized repeatedly for getting the seats wet, a strange thing to worry about when every visible part of her life appeared to be falling apart. The baby stirred briefly before settling again, wrapped inside an old blanket that had clearly been washed hundreds of times. As I drove, I noticed she kept looking behind us through the rear window. She wasn't curious. She was afraid. I introduced myself as Graham. She quietly told me her name was Celeste. The baby's name was Rowan, only 6 months old. Beyond that, she said very little. Every answer came after long pauses, as though every sentence required enormous strength. Instead of taking her directly to a motel, something inside me suggested another place. My late grandparents had owned a small farmhouse outside town that I now maintained while deciding what to do with it. The home wasn't luxurious, but it was warm, clean, and empty except for basic furniture. It had become a place filled with memories instead of people. When we arrived, the rain had softened into a gentle drizzle. Daylight still filtered through thick clouds as I carried several boxes aside to make space. Celeste stepped inside cautiously, almost expecting someone to tell her she wasn't welcome. She stood in the middle of the living room, holding Rowan close, and quietly cried without making a sound. That silence hurt more than any scream could have. The kitchen still contained canned food and dry supplies. I found fresh milk, bread, fruit, and soup. While the soup warmed on the stove, Celeste carefully changed Rowan into dry clothes from a worn backpack containing almost nothing else. Every item had been folded neatly despite obvious hardship. She wasn't careless. She had simply run out of places to survive. Little by little, pieces of her story emerged. She had once believed she was building a beautiful future. The baby's father had been charming, generous, and convincing. But over time, affection became control. Control became isolation. Isolation slowly became fear. Every friendship disappeared. Every family connection faded after endless manipulation. By the time Rowan was born, she had nowhere left to turn. She finally escaped after realizing that staying would teach her son that fear was normal. She hadn't left because she was brave. She had left because she was terrified of what would happen if she stayed. The nearest women's shelter had no available space that afternoon. Every phone call ended with apologies and waiting lists. Social services promised assistance, but paperwork and emergency placement still required time. Time was exactly what she didn't have. So she walked. Hour after hour. In the rain. Hoping somewhere would appear before her strength disappeared. That somewhere became my grandparents' farmhouse. Over the following days, sunlight gradually replaced the storm. Rowan began smiling more often, his cheerful laughter filling rooms that had remained silent since my grandparents passed away. It amazed me how children could create hope without even understanding the darkness surrounding them. Celeste insisted on cleaning the house each morning. She repaired torn curtains with needle and thread she found inside an old sewing kit. She organized forgotten cupboards and revived the neglected garden outside. She couldn't afford to repay kindness with money, so she repaid it with dignity. Watching her reminded me of my grandmother, who believed broken people didn't need pity. They needed opportunities. Still, fear lingered. Every unfamiliar vehicle passing the property made Celeste freeze. Every unexpected phone notification caused visible panic. Trauma doesn't disappear simply because danger ends. It continues living inside memories long after circumstances improve. Several weeks later, I helped her connect with legal aid, counselors, and a local support organization. The process wasn't easy. Reliving painful experiences during interviews reopened emotional wounds she desperately wanted to leave behind. Yet every appointment made her slightly stronger. Then another unexpected challenge arrived. Her estranged father appeared. She hadn't spoken to him in nearly 5 years. Their separation hadn't happened because he stopped loving her. It happened because manipulation had convinced her that everyone else was the enemy. Shame had kept her away long after she realized the truth. He looked older than she remembered. His shoulders carried regret that no words could fully express. Neither knew how to begin. Sometimes forgiveness isn't blocked by anger. Sometimes it's blocked by guilt. He believed he had failed his daughter. She believed she had abandoned her family. They stood facing each other on the farmhouse porch during a calm afternoon while Rowan reached happily toward the grandfather he had never met. That tiny child unknowingly became the bridge between two broken hearts. Tears replaced years of silence. No dramatic speeches followed. Just two people choosing each other again after believing reconciliation had become impossible. Life slowly transformed. Celeste found work at a neighborhood bakery whose owner valued determination more than perfect resumes. She rented a modest apartment nearby after saving every possible dollar. Rowan learned to crawl, then laugh louder than anyone thought possible. Meanwhile, I found unexpected healing of my own. After losing both grandparents, I had convinced myself that loneliness was simply adulthood. I buried myself in work because empty houses never argued or disappointed anyone. But helping one frightened stranger reminded me that compassion doesn't only rescue those receiving it. It changes those giving it too. The abandoned farmhouse stopped feeling like a museum of grief. It became a place where life returned. Months later, Celeste invited me to Rowan's first birthday celebration at a community park beneath bright afternoon sunshine. Friends from the bakery came. Her reunited father proudly carried balloons while chasing his grandson across the grass. Volunteers from the support organization laughed together around picnic tables. Looking around, I realized none of these people would have been connected if one vehicle hadn't stopped during one rainy afternoon. One ordinary decision had quietly rewritten dozens of lives. Before everyone left, Celeste handed me a small wooden picture frame she had restored herself. Inside was a photograph someone had taken during Rowan's birthday. He was laughing while reaching toward us both beneath the warm afternoon sun. On the back she had written a sentence that nearly brought me to tears. It read that home isn't always a place you find. Sometimes it's a person who refuses to drive away. Years passed. Rowan grew into a cheerful little boy who loved exploring every muddy trail and asking endless questions about everything he saw. Celeste became a supervisor at the bakery and later began volunteering with organizations helping women escape dangerous situations. She often welcomed frightened mothers arriving with children, remembering exactly how hopeless that first day had felt. Whenever someone apologized for needing help, she gently reminded them that surviving was never something to apologize for. One rainy afternoon, while driving home from work, I noticed another stranded traveler beside a road. This time it wasn't a frightened mother but an elderly man whose car had broken down. Without hesitation, I pulled over. Because kindness has a remarkable way of continuing long after the original moment has ended. It travels quietly from one heart to another until strangers become neighbors, neighbors become friends, and ordinary people become unforgettable parts of each other's stories. Before this story ends, I'd love to hear from you. Please leave a meaningful comment and tell us, have you ever experienced a moment when one person's kindness completely changed your life, or have you been given the chance to become that person for someone else? Your story might encourage someone who desperately needs hope today. As I often think back to that rainy afternoon, I realize the most unforgettable words were never complicated. They weren't carefully planned or beautifully spoken. They were simply the words of someone who had almost lost faith in humanity but still held on to one tiny thread of hope. She had only said she just needed somewhere to go. What she truly found wasn't merely shelter from the rain. She found people willing to remind her that broken chapters are not the end of the story, that forgiveness can rebuild families, that courage often looks like taking one more step when every part of you wants to stop, and that hope sometimes arrives disguised as an ordinary stranger willing to slow down instead of driving past. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a meaningful comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another emotional journey. Thank you for being part of our community, where every story reminds us that even the smallest act of compassion can become the beginning of someone else's new life.